What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Sweat It Out podcast. Today we have a special guest. She's a huge transformation coach who's helping transform young women's lives physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm telling you guys, she is one of the best at what she does, and she delivers top quality every single day. And you guys have probably seen her on social media. So with further ado, please help me welcome Maddie Jones. What's
Hello.
up?
How's it going?
Doing great. How you been?
Doing really well. Yeah.
How's
Grateful
things going
for
out
it
there
all.
for you? I know you mentioned you're in California.
Yes. Out here in Orange County, California. Thriving
How's that looking?
in quarantine.
How's that looking for you as far as your business?
Honestly, it's been probably the best thing for my business though. Before I used to be a fitness instructor, so I was doing everything that I'm doing now with my one-on-one clients, but all separated into different departments and going all over the place. And I always wanted to run my own business. I just never felt like I had the time because I was working so much. So having to stop working gave me the time to start this, and it's going a lot better than I had expected in such a short amount of time. And I'm really grateful to be able to combine everything that I do into one program that's truly able to transform people's lives on so many different levels. So it's really, really awesome being able to work deeper with people.
No, 100%. I think off the bat, I think we can all agree that a lot of coaches, especially that are in our field, have seen either a big jump in their business or have really crashed, depending on how they approached it. Obviously, in your case, you took full advantage of it, and I think we can relate in the sense of when we wanted to launch this podcast, we did it because that was one of our problems. We had our full-time work jobs. We working for ourselves, but we were coaching so many clients, we were doing many events together, and we always kept putting off the podcast. And if it wasn't, believe it or not, if it wasn't for COVID, we probably wouldn't be as big as this is today with the podcast, just because of the time being. So with that being said, I think we can all agree that this has been a huge shift, for all coaches, especially today, seeing where things are headed. So I want to ask you, what were the biggest things for you, initially when it came to the coaching aspect that you knew you needed to make a change in order to succeed and move forward?
So my story is kind of funny. I actually had a really big change in life plans. For the past year, I had been planning to move to Thailand to help run yoga teacher trainings and dive deeper into that route. So I was preparing for that, and I quit all my jobs and I was ready to leave and go across the world. But of course, due to Corona, that didn't happen. Thailand's still completely locked down, and you can't travel to most places with the US passport these days. So I was, okay, I'm stuck in California and I don't have a job anymore. And I don't really want to go back to my old jobs anymore. They were good in the time being while I was a college student, but I graduated back in December. So I guess almost a year ago now. And I was like, I really wanted to start doing my own thing. So I started to come up with ideas, and I luckily, really almost immediately upon wanting to start my own business, I came across a business coach that super resonated with me. And so he's just really helped me launch everything, because I recognize that I'm a good coach, but I didn't understand the business side of things.
What's his name?
Hakeem White.
Hakeem White. Okay. Yeah,
he's amazing. Definitely shout out to Hakeem. He's the real deal for sure, and has helped me a ton, gotten me to where I am today with my business. I totally accredit that to him. So I'm definitely grateful for that connection and being able to put all of my skills into one master thing that I could share with people.
What were some of the biggest takeaways, right, that you found through this transformation that you made, kind of going out on your own and really starting your own venture?
I love being able to do things my way and also on my own time. I've always had a very particular way of doing things, and sometimes when you work for another company, you have to do it their way, even though maybe I don't know, my clients have always loved the way that I do things more so than the way that it was supposed to be done. And so now just being able to do it that way without any troubles has been really nice. And also making my own schedules has been great for me as a person. I used to be, as a fitness instructor, you work crazy hours. Like I would be teaching at 5 a.m. and would teach all morning long, go to school during the day, teach an afternoon class, go to school in the evening, then teach night classes from 5 until 9 p.m. and then do it again and again. And it definitely took a toll on my body and my health. I developed an autoimmune disease, and it's really hard to recover from an autoimmune disease when you're going through so much stress. And even though it was good stress, right? And it's exercise stress, it's still not, it was still too much stress for me to actually be able to recover. So with that autoimmune disease, I lost like 20 pounds really quick. Wow. And I'm pretty small already. So me being like 20 pounds smaller than I am now is really small. And so I've been able to gain my weight back and get a lot healthier. I'm on a lot less medication. So for health-wise, it's also been great.
Well, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes, especially when you're younger, you could like overdo it because you're just trying to make it and just trying to do it all. And you're like, I have all the energy in the world, I can do it. But just because you technically can do it doesn't mean necessarily that you should.
Ask Josh, I'm always trying to overdo it.
Oh man, I always gotta have him calm down. I mean, I don't know how much you're willing to kind of share with us and our audience, but how was it kind of dealing with your autoimmune disease while trying to balance and transition and figure out exactly like what path that you wanted to take in life? Because that's a lot to handle all at once, right? And
yeah, definitely.
to be able to battle back from that and to be able to, actually make yourself more resilient and become healthier and not just healthier physically, but healthier mentally with your relationship with exercise, with nutrition, with everything. Like, kind of walk us through that and take us through some of the steps that you used in order to overcome that.
Yeah, I think that when I got diagnosed with this autoimmune disease, originally it's called lymphocytic colitis. It's a really rare autoimmune disease. Like most people don't have it. And when I first got diagnosed with it, my doctor was like, I don't even understand how you got this because it's really rare, one. And then the people who do get it are in their 70s
Wow.
and you're in your 20s. So I'm like, so I have old lady insides, great.
And it's not, is it a genetic thing? Does it come from family? Do you know of a family that has it?
No one else in the family has it. Like it's really unknown what could have caused it. Stress could be a factor. I also, when I was younger, for a big majority of my life, struggled a lot with depression, and a potential cause is the antidepressants that I was on.
Okay.
So potential stress, various things. So when I first got diagnosed with it, they were thinking that it'd be something that we could like fix short term, but he like recognized like it's pretty severe. Like you've had problems for a long time. I'm like, yeah, I have. I just didn't really ever get it checked out until I started learning more about the body and figuring out like, okay, you definitely like have something wrong. And so then I got on like a bunch of medications and went on this really, and nothing was really happening for like 6 months. Then I asked from the beginning if I could see a dietitian or anything. He's like, no, the meds will just work, and they didn't. So then 6 months later, I went to a dietitian and I was on a really strict diet of essentially I could have meat, white rice, eggs, melons, and bananas. And that's it, which isn't horrible. Like I like meat and white rice, so that's good, but like not having like other fruits or vegetables or nuts or like things that you would think are good for you was definitely weird.
How long did that last? How long did you need to like eat that?
So I ate like that
regimen?
for probably 6 months. And then it was just becoming more like, okay. And that's when I actually started to actually see differences and start to get better. But then after we continued, like it still wasn't fully better. And it just sort of got to this point where I was like, okay, this is probably chronic. And so, eat, most of the time like that, but also let's start to like reintroduce some foods into your diet. That way it could be a little bit more realistic. So you could live like this forever instead of being so strict on things. Cause that was definitely challenging. Like I just got into mentality like, okay, you just got to do it for this time being. But then I was like, okay, this is forever. I don't know if I could just eat like this forever, ever.
I gotta say off the bat, I obviously none of us can relate with this, but I think that, just hearing you saying it, obviously you can tell that you've learned to like cope with it, deal with it, create awareness around it. And, you are clearly doing some great things. How is that positioning of the mindset when it came to understanding that I have to live with this, and I need to make the best of every opportunity I have for myself to be able to continue growing and scaling and doing what I need to do for my own health and for my businesses, my relations, all that stuff. Like, what was that mindset that it took? Because I'm sure a lot of listeners who might relate with certain things, maybe not specifically that, but other things that they're going through. And I'm sure they can use a lot from some of these mindset tools. And I know that's part of your coaching.
Yeah, definitely. I will say that it was definitely a struggle in the beginning and really frustrating with myself. I felt it was like kind of ironic. I'm this person who's like big in this health, fitness, wellness realm, and I'm so unhealthy with this disease that's literally making me wither away and making me so weak and in pain all the time and nauseous all the time. And like, so it was definitely really frustrating for a long time. And I did battle it for a while. And it made me cry a lot and all these things. But then eventually got to this point where it's like, okay, well, you have to recognize that you are not your disease, right? And once you're allowed to step out of, oh, I am, this is like embody my whole thing. And of course that can be challenging when you have these symptoms, these things going on all the time, but you have to step out of the, like, this disease is me, to like, I am not my disease. And that like, you're a person who has like your whole life besides that disease. And also figuring out and also praising like other areas of your life where you are healthy. Like, just because certain aspects might not be ideal doesn't mean that all aspects are horrible. So really working with a lot of meditations for myself and affirmations, just sort of reappraising, like, I like am accepting like health and abundance like coming my way, and I like know like I will recover from this, and I know like I have the best doctors on my side, and just like things like that to tell yourself could be really powerful, because you can definitely easily get into this dark space of like, oh my gosh, this is working, this is taking so long, like I'm so unhealthy, like everything's falling apart. But if you can't go down that rabbit hole, it's not going to be conductive to your health. But once you start, I started doing like an affirmations meditation every evening to like before I would go to bed, just affirming my abundance and my health. And I shit you not, while I was doing that, like that's when I actually started to see the most amount of significant changes. Of course, I was on meds for a long time and I was doing the diet stuff, but once I started doing that every single night before going to bed, I really started seeing big changes in myself. And that just goes to show how powerful the mind is. If you tell yourself I'm healing and okay, then like your mind will help facilitate that healing.
100%. So you doing this shift and getting your mind equipped and yourself equipped with all the necessary tools you need to combat this. And I really love the approach that you took. Is this big of enough of a change to get you off these meds, or do you still have to continue supplementing that in a smaller dosage?
I'm definitely on a smaller dosage. I was hoping to wean off of the medication, and I kind of tested it out and it was not good. So I recently went back at full on, because I was at the point where I was taking one of the medications like once every 3 days. And I was like, is this even doing anything? I don't think this has ever done anything for me. And I went camping for a week and I accidentally forgot it. And I didn't see any changes. So I was like, you know what? I'm done taking that. And then I went another week without it. And then all of a sudden, all these symptoms started coming back. And I was like, no. So I started taking it again. So that is something also to cope with. Like, yes, of course, we like to live our life off of medications, but sometimes, like with whatever the present case is, sometimes you need to be on the medications. And so trusting that what your doctor prescribed you is probably good for you, and figuring out other ways to proceed with that.
No, I definitely think it's one of those tricky areas where, obviously the goal is nobody wants to be on meds, but I think that at the same time, we have to understand that there are certain things in place that are needed for certain situations and certain things that we may have that will help and cope with certain things. So I think it's just understanding overall, if you can control the the limit, and by you being a healthy individual and by tackling certain things yourself and making sure that you're in a better position to decrease the number of meds you're taking, I think that can be a huge goal right there, especially for a lot of the people who, you know, can't get off of meds, you know, for other diseases and other circumstances in their entire life. You know, if one of my family members, like my aunt, from being an example, you know, she had the liver transplant. You know, she needs to make sure she takes these certain meds, because if not, her liver will not function, especially when they put another liver from somebody else in her, you know, so that way her body doesn't fight the liver. So, you know, I think it's one of those things that, yes, I think people at the same time need to understand, because I've known recently, and I've seen people where it's like, my goal is to get off these meds. And I think sometimes people need to understand at the same time, like, there are certain meds and certain things that we might have that we might not be able to take off, and that's okay. You know, that's okay. But let's work towards limiting this, reducing it, and just making the healthiest version of yourself. And understanding that that's perfectly fine. You know, and that should be the goal as well at hand, especially with individuals that are dealing with certain issues like that.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I think it's really unfortunate that in our culture, like, being on medication is almost shamed. And a lot of people just don't understand why people are on meds. Even with something as simple as antidepressants, like, yes, of course, it's awesome if you're able to get off of them, but some people's level of depression is so severe that they cannot get off of them. And so people telling them, like, oh, well, just work out and eat healthier and love yourself, like, is so insensitive to individuals. And it's like, they're already doing everything. Like, I could assure you that. So I'm always one that, like, you know, if that's what you need to do to function okay and be fine and feel a lot better, then, like, that's totally fine. And I know, like, definitely with my meds, of course, I was wanting to get off of them, but I think now just, like, focusing on accepting, like, you know what, like, I'm grateful for these meds because they make me healthier and they, like, take care of me. So instead of resenting them, it's more of, like, finding gratitude for what they can do for you.
And how, you know, my mother, you know, battled with depression herself, and she was on and off antidepressants for quite a while there. You know, and I did see kind of a change in, you know, her demeanor. She was a lot more calm. She's relatively a calm person, but a lot more calm, like almost too docile to a certain point. Like, what was your experience with you know, antidepressant? I mean, if you feel like you want to share, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty personal.
For me, I struggled chronically with depression from the time I was a young child up into my early 20s. And once I began college, so like 18, I really, like, did this deep dive into, like, self-care and self-help, and was doing so many different things trying to make myself better. I was already a fitness instructor at the time too, like, helping other people feel amazing, and, like, people didn't know on the inside that I was not doing okay. And I was diving into yoga and meditation and, like, all these different practices and working, like, so hard to be better. And I was going to therapy, and, like, I was just still so stuck that it was, like, frustrating and I was exhausted. And so after several years of, like, this self-growth help journey, but, like, still feeling so stagnant, that's when I talked with my therapist, and he set me up with a psychiatrist, because I was like, okay, well, it seems like there's probably a chemical imbalance in your brain, and because you've been depressed for literally almost whole life, like, and so you're, like, wanting this happiness, you're really, like, doing a lot of great things for yourself to be there, but, like, your brain chemistry is not functioning well. So when I got on antidepressants, initially they put me on a lower dosage. I didn't feel anything. So they put me on a slightly higher dosage, and that was honestly the best because it just got me out of this such a depressed state. It didn't make me feel you know, wishy-washy or soft or anything. I know, you know, it's important to figure out which medication works best for you, because a lot of them have different effects. So some might make you feel, like, horrible. So if that's the case, like, find a different medication. There's tons. But the one I had, it felt like it made the depression just go away. And I was like, good. And I was fine. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I took those for 2 years. And I continued to grow deeper and continue to do all the work, because, you know, I think the problem is if people just take meds and they don't do any of the inner work, then it's like, okay, well, you're not setting yourself up for success. But if you're taking meds and you're doing all the inner work, then, like, that's really going to be beneficial for you, whether you have to stay on the meds or if you're able to come off. And I just began to get to like such a really, really good place that my one of my good friends reached out to me. He's like, Maddie, like, I don't know like what your scenario is, but like you're doing so much better. Like, I think he's like, I don't want to offend you saying this, but I think like you might be able to get off those. And like it's one of my really good friends that I look up to, and I was like, I think you're right. But I was honestly terrified because I kind of joke to this day, like being depressed again is like my worst fear because it's such a dark, horrible place. And so I talked with my psychiatrist about kind of perfect timing. It was right before I was leaving to Thailand to do my yoga teacher training. And I was like, what better time to wean off the antidepressant medications than while on a tropical island with beautiful yogis doing yoga all day long. It really was the best time to wean off of those. I struggle with nightmares and stuff. That's a common side effect from the withdrawal, but I was in such a safe, sacred space that it really felt okay. And by the end of that training, I had reached such a new level as a person. I felt this new level of just like genuine joy and happiness that was just like so radiant. And I was like, wow, I hope that this stays. And it has, which has been amazing. Not to say that I haven't ever had like sad moments. I think that's a part of recognizing is life isn't always like rainbow and sunshine like we might want it to be, but accepting like, okay, it's okay to have sad feelings, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're depressed again. It's okay to cry if something horrible happened, but that doesn't mean that you're depressed. And so, or if you even find, I will say at the start of quarantine, I definitely went into a little bit of a slump, being immunocompromised. My doctors kind of scared me, like, you need to home isolate and all this stuff. And it was just like, whoa, so much. And so that kind of put me into a little bit of a slump, but I was able to get myself out of that slump in a week, which is like Great. The fastest I've ever been able to do that. Before I would stay in these slumps for weeks, if not months, if not years. So being able to have the skill set now with all my practices, the yoga, the meditation, everything with that, super important. So that's been my experience with that. I thought it was really helpful and beneficial for me.
How important do you because you mentioned like really restructuring or reframing your belief structure on like, the events that usually trigger people into going back into a depressive state. How exactly were you able to reframe those beliefs so that you could kind of check yourself and make sure that you didn't kind of follow that path back into depression?
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I think is huge is recognizing if you're depressed or if you're just surrounded by a bunch of assles. I don't know if
that's a good tip.
Sorry.
That's a pretty good tip. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I mean, listen, if people are being assholes, you need to call them out.
Because that's
Josh,
the thing.
A lot of to me, bro.
I mean, I can't help it with you. I can't help it. It's come second nature with you, though.
But I think that's a huge, important thing that like we need to set boundaries with people. And if someone isn't serving you well, you need to cut that person out of your life. And it doesn't matter if they're family, right? It doesn't matter who they are in your life. If they're your boyfriend, like dump him, like whatever it is. Like I think it's really important
heard that, girls?
No, don't
listen,
dump me.
ladies.
Don't dump
you
me.
You deserve better.
You heard that? Stay away from Josh. What the fuck? No, but so, I think it isn't. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it is important, to understand and learn when it's time to move on from someone, and it's not selfish, right? Like it's a very common belief when you cut someone out of your life that it's like, oh, well, you're being selfish because you don't want to give your time to me anymore. It's like, well, I'm not being selfish. Like I only have so many hours in the day. And like you said, if you're not going to contribute to the benefit of me and like us as like a whole, our relationship as friends or whatever the relationship might be, like, it's time to move on. I can't, we have to be moving forward. We have to be trying to progress. And if you're going to be holding me back and holding yourself back, like
100%,
I don't have the time for that. It's not selfish at all.
Yeah.
It's like that saying goes, you are who you hang out with, and the more you hang out with the people that don't serve you, you're not going to serve yourself. And I think that 100% you nailed it with that, because you know, and I think it's interesting the way you put it, of understanding if you're depressed or it's the people you're hanging around with, because it's true. You hang around with the wrong people. And I've known from my past when I was younger, hanging around with the wrong people.
Here in Miami, no way.
Especially Miami.
No way.
You can feel like shit. You know, you can feel like shit. And you realize that you start playing game. You're like, shit, like, is it me who sucks? Is it this? And, you know,
and it's not hard to slip back into those.
And it's not, you know, and it's more like, damn, I realized, now that I'm thinking with what you said, I realized, I was like, no, it's the people around myself that's making me suck or making myself feel suck. So yeah, it's my fault for putting myself and leaving myself in that, but I got to take myself out of that. And it's true. The moment you get yourself out of that, it's like, whoa, I'm a different person.
It's so huge. And, you know, something that I think could be helpful regarding people is meditation. If you're not already meditating, you should, especially if you're the person who thinks you can't sit still with yourself. You definitely should. I definitely couldn't sit still with myself when I started. But one of the powerful things in meditation, especially if you do it, I like to do it in the morning before anything else, is there's a time where you could connect with your true inner essence. And then also you're able to separate, that's not me. Because as we go around life, we're picking up all these different energies. And so sometimes someone else's negative, dark, ugly energy could fully absorb into you. But when you sit with yourself, you have the moment to, wait, okay, this energy that I'm feeling, this actually wasn't mine at all. And I just like got absorbed by it. And so I'm just going to put it in this pile over here. And oh, this nice energy, like this is mine. So I'm going to put it here. But to kind of go into the route, if you are having dark and bad things going on within yourself, I think it's also important to, you know, go into that. A lot of times we want to block out the dark feelings or the negative feelings, or even things that are totally normal and fine, like, oh, you just went through a breakup, or oh, someone you loved pass away, and feeling this grief. Sometimes we feel this guilt, or like, oh, I should be doing better than however you think you should. But I don't think that is nice to yourself at all. I think it's important to give yourself the time to grieve and recover and really dive into the depths of why you're feeling that way and what's going on, and then ask yourself, how can you nurture yourself in such a way, show you up for yourself in the way that you want others to show up for yourself. And once you do that deep inner work, that's how you really truly heal. And yoga, this is very much heart chakra energy, going from the deepest depths, the darkest times. That's where you're able to arise to new heights and actually grow more as a person. We don't grow unless we're uncomfortable. So if you're in an uncomfortable space, know that your next leveling up is going to be so much greater from wherever you're at.
That's exactly right. That's something that me and Josh talk about all the time, is in order to
it's like
grow,
your two favorite words: level up.
Level up. You know, level up out of the out of the uncomfortability. 100%.
That might have to be your first tattoo, dude.
Maybe.
I can do it. I think we have a ballpoint pen here somewhere. We can get started.
Just right on the chest, right on the collarbone, so people could see it.
No regrets.
I'm gonna make sure I do it right, and I'll drop money on that.
Dude, I would pay for that. That'd be great.
But let me ask you, since we're on the topic of meditation, I really love how deep you're taking this with. What is your best way to handle, especially since you work with clients, those clients who are busy individuals who might not be able to dedicate a whole hour, sometimes these deep meditations go into 2 hours. How can you give them meditation that works effectively, but it can be in small increments of 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes and get still a nice big return on that time being that they're using, and still benefit and go a long way?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's really important. It's something that I even struggled with in the past, being like, oh, if I don't have my full hour to meditate, like I'm not going to meditate at all. But then you realize, like, well, that's not good for you either. And like you said, even just 5 minutes can be huge. Even just one breath could be a meditation, or allowing yourself to close your eyes, taking a deep breath in, expanding your belly, lifting up through your heart space, lifting all the way up into your collarbones. Exhale, relax in the shoulders, empty your chest, empty your belly. Just one breath like that could just fully reset a person. But one of my favorite 5-minute meditations is just a morning gratitude meditation. Do it the first thing when you wake up, come to your breath, just like I did there. Allow yourself to settle into that, and then begin to ask yourself, like, what are you grateful for in your life? I think gratitude's one of the most profound practices you could do. And even science shows that this increases your heart coherence. It's one of the best methods to increase your heart coherence, and which helps with anxiety and stress and all those great things. And so asking yourself what you're grateful for, and it doesn't have to be big things. A lot of times we think like, oh, nothing good is happening. Well, you have a roof over your head, you're breathing, you have food in your stomach probably, you know, maybe just the sun on your skin in the morning, or your morning cup of coffee, all these little things we could find gratitude for. And the more you practice gratitude, the more you are almost overwhelmed by this abundance of gratitude. I've definitely cried in gratitude meditations, just feeling so overwhelmed by how grateful I am. But what's important, more so than just recalling what you're grateful for, is then diving into your heart space and feeling that gratitude in your body, and allowing yourself to truly feel the sensations of gratitude, and allowing yourself to rest in those sensations for a little bit of time. And then you could come back to your breath, come back to your space, and start the rest of your day. And that just takes 5 minutes, which is delightful.
Would you say that the gratitude meditation practice is like your go-to practice, or do you have other specific ones that you utilize mainly?
Yeah, gratitude is definitely one of my go-tos for the daily. I love sandwiching my day with gratitude. So morning gratitude meditation, and then journaling gratitudes in the evening, I think could be really powerful and also helpful, because then you have this journal, if it's just for gratitudes, that's full of everything that you're grateful for. And so if you're ever feeling especially down, you could go back and read your gratitudes, and that'll like for sure be a way to like help genuinely pick you up. And also, even if you're just writing the same thing every single day that you're grateful for, it makes you so much more grateful for whoever that person is, whatever that thing is. It really just makes you have this deep, like genuine, like, wow, like I'm writing the same person's name down every day. Like, whoa.
So Josh, in the mornings, do you always say you're grateful for having me in your life?
Something like that.
He should.
Maybe phrased a little differently, but it goes something along those lines.
Another meditation though that I really thoroughly enjoy for myself as well as my clients, especially those who struggle with depression, or really anyone who struggles with like hard times, because we always, in life, there's always joy and there's always discomfort. And sometimes, you know, you might be lucky and you're so joyous that it's hard to remember discomfort's there, but it is. And a lot of times the discomfort might be so strong that it's hard to remember joy is still there, but it is. So it's a 3-part meditation of joy that I very much so enjoy doing. Part 1 is you remember your joy. And I like this remembrance of joy rather than faking feelings of joy, because that wouldn't really resonate with you or feel authentic. But if you're able to recall a past event where you experienced joy and actually recreate that memory in mind and feel all those sensations again, you can really truly relive the sensation of joy even amongst your discomfort. And I think that's huge. Part 2 of joy is allowing your joy to continue. And this is another yoga practice. And it's asking yourself, what's going well in my life right now? Oftentimes we dwell on what's not going well. We're not to blame. Our amygdala, that reptilian part of our brain that back in the day, you know, maybe we were chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Amygdala tells us to run to safety, like thanks amygdala. But today we'll get caught up on things like someone cutting us off in traffic, and we'll be so upset about that all day. I think it's common when you ask someone how was their day, they'll be like, oh, and they'll tell you all the crap of their day first, before all the things that went well, even though probably more things went well than went wrong. So asking yourself each day, like, what went well today? And maybe it was just a couple of things, but maybe you could actually a lot of little things well today. So that's a good way to help your joy continue. And the final part of joy is celebrating the joy of another. And it's important to do part 1 and part 2 first, because just like on an airplane with your oxygen, you have to put your own mask on before you help someone else. Yep. Same thing when it comes to taking care of yourself, right? But sometimes, you know, you're really in a lot of discomfort. It's really hard to find anything that's joyous in your life. But you could celebrate someone else's joy, someone who you love, seeing them joyous, instead of getting jealous or having resentment, celebrating their joy. and recognizing that like, whoa, like me celebrating their joy and seeing how joyous they are brings me joy too. And so that's the third part of joy that I think is also really beautiful, and another way to just expand joy throughout your life.
Well, you definitely touched upon some three big pointers on joy, and I really love that analogy you said with the if you're on the airplane and the masks come out, you gotta make sure you put on yours first to be able to then help somebody else. And that's off the bat so true when it comes to anything that you do, is that if you don't make the best version of yourself and the most equipped version of yourself, how are you going to be able to be selfless for other people out there and give them your best, especially when it comes to your friends, your families, your clients, the relationships you have. And it really goes a long way when you actually give yourself the right pieces to be able to give back, because you will be able to give back much more. Now, I really want to dive into something a little deeper here, because I know that, we touched upon the meditation and, the depression and the different stuff. I know since you work with a lot of clients, I'm sure you have a lot of your experiences that you relate with, and you use a lot of what you've learned, what you've dealt with to work with your clients. Especially with COVID and where things are moving forward, there's been a huge increase on suicidal ratings and depression, especially here in America. And you see it happening, especially more with the youth. I wanted to ask you, have you personally dealt with clients that have experienced suicidal thoughts or have attempted certain things like that? And how were you able to help or help them cope with that and get themselves out of those situations? If you have worked with one like that, and if you haven't, what are your best pointers for those out there to be able to bring themselves back down from those thought processes? And obviously I know depression is a huge part of it, so I know medication, all that stuff, but what would be your biggest pointers for any individual out there who might be dealing with these kind of thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's really important and huge. I haven't dealt with any clients who've had suicidal thoughts. I've definitely dealt with a lot of depressed clients, but even my younger self dealt with suicidal thoughts. I never acted on it, but I definitely used to have these thoughts. And I think something that's really important, and it could be scary and challenging, but reaching out for help, I think, is one of the biggest things you could do. A lot of times when we struggle and we suffer and we're depressed and they're in this dark space, a lot of people struggle with fear or embarrassment or shame or thoughts of not wanting to be a burden to anyone else. But it's important to recognize that those who love you, you are not a burden to. And if you're struggling, like, those people are going to be there for you to help you, right? And so oftentimes we struggle alone because we're afraid to open up and admit that we're struggling. But the only way to actually heal is to first admit that you're struggling and reach out to help, instead of going into this isolated space of not engaging with people. That's just going to get you into a darker hole. So engaging with people, reaching out for help, whether it's to your friends or even going to professional help. I always recommend professional help too, just like you hire someone to maybe do your taxes or help you with anything like that. I hire a business coach. Like, why would you not hire someone to help you with your mental health? You're with yourself forever, right? Some other important things too are recognizing and kind of going inward of like what your, and this is a nice meditation to do, is what your ideal life is and what your ideal self is and what your ideal world is. And then from there, what can you start doing right now to create that a reality? Sometimes when we're in these dark spaces, we feel stuck and we feel like maybe I'm not in control of my life or this life isn't worth living. But you can change your life and you can begin to make action. And it's not to say that it's an easy process or that it's done overnight, but you could start making little changes day by day to make your life more enjoyable for yourself. Even something as simple as having a nice home environment. Like, if you're in a dark home space, like, move out. It doesn't matter if it's going to cost you more money, because your sanity is better than living in an unhealthy home space. And then making your home space nice, like putting up decorations and other things that make you joyous, that make you feel good, that make you feel safe and protected. I think having a safe home space is really important, because if you don't, then where do you have to go to escape? You have nowhere. So, and if, you know, you're a child and your home safe isn't safe, like there's ways to reach out and get out of that situation. A lot of times kids could fear, you know, reaching out, expressing that their home life isn't safe, but it's the thing that they should do rather than just going into this deep depressive state and feeling so stuck and stagnant. That's not fair to them at such a young age.
I kind of want to go back to the point that you made about, you know, understanding the path in life that you want to take and then following that path, right? Because I think a lot of people are very misguided with the intention that they set, you know, moving forward, and having an idea of like, okay, where do I really want to end up in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years, right? And not allowing other people's viewpoints of what that reality will look like, I think is very challenging for most people, right? Because they want to be a people pleaser. They, you know, and the one person that they're actually not pleasing when they do that is themselves, you know? So what are ways that, you know, you were able to kind of shift your own, you know, thought process on that and head in a direction that you wanted to go in, and how do you coach your clients through that?
Yeah, one of my best advice that I got from one of my parents' friends when I was a kid is to follow what you love and success will find you. Don't chase success, it will elude you. And I think that's so true. Oftentimes, people could go to college or try to chase this career because they're wanting to make money, and then you're miserable for the rest of your life. And like, why would you do that to yourself? But instead of chasing whatever your true passion is, because think about it, especially like in my generation, we're probably gonna have to work every day forever. And so like, if you might as well do something that you love and recognize that that could change. You could completely change career paths at any moment that you want to do something that's going to be better for yourself. So yes, of course, it's scary to take risks and do things non-traditionally, but ultimately that will bring you so much more joy if you figure out what your passions are. Now, if you don't know what you're passionate about, then take the time to experience a bunch of different things. I think getting more experience could be really helpful, because sometimes we're like, I have no idea what I want. And when you try things out, you could be like, whoa, this was amazing. I love this. Or like, you know what, this actually isn't what I thought it was. So I think getting more experience could be helpful if you're stuck trying to figure out your passion. But one of my favorite meditations is taking the time, and I do this one at least on the weekly basis, and it grows every time you do it, is meditating on first and of course, getting into that meditative state, finding your breath, focusing on yourself. I like to focus on your third eye point as you breathe, so you are really being able to connect to your intuition. And then asking yourself, like, what is my ideal self like? If I could be any way that I wanted to be, no limitations, anything is possible, like, what is my ideal self like? What do I look like? What do I sound like? What's my inner essence like? Like, who am I at my like true core? Like, what is this inner self? Because we all know, and sometimes it might feel so far away because we're not living our true self, but whatever you envision as that ideal self is your true self. You just need to tap into that space. Then from there, envisioning your ideal life, which a lot of times people can get confused with your ideal self. You'll be like, oh, well, in my ideal self, I do this for work or I do that for fun. It's like, no, that's your life. That's not yourself, right? So taking the time to envision, like, what would you do for work? What would you do for pleasure? Where would you want to live? What are the people like that you surround yourself with? And how do you interact with these people? And how do they make you feel? Asking yourself these types of questions can be huge. What's your typical day like in your dream life? And expanding it even bigger, the ideal world. Like, whoa, if the world could be any way that you wanted it to be, what would your ideal world be like? How would humans treat one another in the world? How would the state of our environment be? How would humanity be? What changes would you like to see in our ideal world? What else would you like to see? Like, really just diving deeper into these questions. And the more you do this meditation, the deeper you'll go with yourself, and the more you'll be able to connect to your higher self and really understand like what you want. Sometimes expanding out to that worldview could put things into perspective. Because sometimes you might be a little attached to ego-driven things of like, oh, I want this. But then when you expand out to like, oh, what do you really, really want for like everyone, for all? Then it could bring it back to like, oh, whoa, like some of those other things weren't so important. And like, this actually is important. So I think it's important whether you meditate or whether you want to journal on those questions, whatever resonates with you more, taking the time to connect to that can be huge. And I would definitely really recommend it.
Yeah, I really think that it's all just about, taking time in general to reflect on the actions that you've taken and where that's led you, and then how do you progress from there, right? No matter the methodology that you use, it's really just about, taking the time to accept the things that have happened in the past, acknowledge them in the first place, accept them, and then figure out a plan to try to make a change in your life. And, I think a lot of people are going to get massive benefit from what we've talked today. I know we're almost at an hour, and I want to give you an opportunity to let everyone know how they can reach out to you and everything before Mendez sends a couple of rapid fire questions your way.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'm Maddie Jones. You can find me on Instagram at Coach Maddie Jones. So CoachMaddyJones. And that's probably the best way to reach out to me, or you could email me at that same at gmail.com. And those are probably the two best ways to connect with me, reach out, and I will respond to all my DMs. So message me, connect with me. I love connecting with people and figuring out how we can help each other and help everyone grow. That's really what I want to do.
Thank you, Maddie.
Yeah, thank you. You guys heard it. She responds to the DM, so hit her up.
Maybe you can take some of those people away from me that are commenting on my feed all the time.
This guy gets... Oh, that's another story.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
This guy gets the craziest comments about his feet. I don't know why, but he just...
You get weird DMs like that? Do you get weird DMs? I get the weird.
I do. There's the weird feet fetish people. Please stay away from us. We will not.
Swipe up for Anthony's OnlyFans.
We won't respond to.
Yeah.
There's definitely some interesting people online too.
Oh, you gotta love them all.
You're genuinely wanting to connect.
All shapes and sizes. We love you all. Everyone who sends us.
Before you send that DM to Josh, just sit back, create some awareness, meditate for a second, and don't do it.
Don't do it. Unless you're gonna send like $100 with
it. You must have some beautiful feet, man.
They're feet. They're definitely feet, I think. At least that's what I've been told.
No, but I want to say thank you again. We definitely dropped a whole bunch of golden nuggets and really appreciate it for having your time on here. But I do have a few rapid fire questions, so we'll get those going. So number one, if you had to pick your favorite tool as a coach to use, and when I mean tool, it just could be any tool that you use, whether it's meditation, spiritually, fitness. If you could pick one, what is your favorite go-to tool?
Breath, because breath is with you everywhere you go. You don't need anything for it. You could do it even while you're with people. While people are talking to you, it can help you be more present and actually listen. You're focusing on your breath and what they're saying.
That's probably the best answer we've had so far.
That is definitely the best answer.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a huge one. If I had to teach one thing, it would be breath.
All day. Let's keep breathing. Number two, what is the number one thing you want to see stopping right now that you know needs to stop in the health industry?
In the health industry, I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of coaches don't focus on people's mindset, and they want people to be these perfect robots, and they'll give them such crazy extremes that are just so unrealistic for anyone to do. And you're like, oh, you have to be this perfect person, and you have to be on the super strict diet and work crazy hours and like all these things. And then people crumble and they get afraid of working out in this healthy lifestyle, and they fully just resent it. And they're like, nope, it's not for me. But then they're still struggling with their health and just so uncomfortable. Instead, I think it's so important to really listen to your clients, create a good relationship, understand where they're at, and help them develop a lifestyle that fits with their lifestyle that's also going to help them reach their goals. I think that's really huge. And definitely a lot of the people I work with who come to me, they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing and so easy to do. And I've had so many kinds of horror story experiences with other coaches, and it's really so sad. I'm like, I can't believe you went through that. And it's horrible. So that in the health and wellness realm, that's probably the number one thing I'd like to see change.
No, that's spot on. And last question, in one sentence, what's the biggest piece of advice you can leave off to all our listeners today?
The biggest piece of advice that you should do every single day, especially if you are struggling, but even if you're not struggling, to help you do well, is wake up every morning and give yourself a hug and tell yourself, I love you, with your name. And
You guys
especially
heard it.
if that makes you feel weird, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, you should definitely be doing that, and watch how that really helps transform the way that you view yourself and the way that you care for yourself, rather than feeling like you have to go to external factors. That was more than one sentence, but.
Amazing.
Yeah, love it.
Amazing.
Absolutely love it. Well, really appreciate you.
Yes,
I know
thank
a
you.
lot of people are going to definitely get a lot of value out of this podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Maddie Jones, everyone. Until next time, guys.
Till next time.